Thank you so much for joining us for the first webinar in CareerSTAT's four-part series on employer best practices. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know it's just a minute or so after, but we really do want to make the most of our 30 minutes together. So we can go to the next slide. So today we will hear from Sarah Currier, Vice President of Talent Strategy, on how Dartmouth-Hitchcock utilizes apprenticeship to expand its rural worker pipeline. We will start with brief overviews of CareerSTAT and Dartmouth-Hitchcock, followed by an interview with Sarah where we're going to learn a lot more information. We are experimenting with a newer 30-minute coffee talk format, and participants are encouraged to use the chat function to ask questions throughout the presentation. Next. So just to do a little level setting for everyone on the line, CareerSTAT is an initiative of the National Fund for Workforce Solutions and is an employer-driven network based on peer exchange. The National CareerSTAT Network includes a range of healthcare employers from across a continuum of care. It also includes industry partnership, workforce development partners, and philanthropic organizations. And CareerSTAT is free to join and open to all who have interest in healthcare workforce development. The Frontline Healthcare Worker Champion Program is a pillar of CareerSTAT and was created in 2014 by a group of healthcare industry leaders who wanted to recognize and encourage peers making sustained investment in their frontline workers' skills and career development. A peer committee defines the criteria and makes the determinations. Thus far, CareerSTAT has recognized 43 healthcare organizations, and the 2019 applications are currently under deliberation. CareerSTAT Champion Organizations heavily informed CareerSTAT Guide to Investing in Frontline Healthcare Workers, which offers healthcare organizations evidence-based best practices, business metrics, a process for implementing workforce investments and integrating them with business goals. This webinar series is an opportunity to learn more about the best practices that champion organizations use to invest in their frontline workers. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to share a little bit more about Dartmouth-Hitchcock.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for dialing in to listen. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our apprenticeship and ready-to-work programs at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and we were incredibly honored last year to be selected as a frontline workforce champion by CareerSTAT, and I can say that we have gained so much for being a part of this network. So without further ado, I'm going to move forward. Next slide. I think it's important to understand a little bit about us at Dartmouth-Hitchcock and our size in order to kind of get the full context of what we're doing. We are about 12,000 employees across an academic medical center with a number of smaller community hospitals that also support us, and a number of outpatient ambulatory clinics and a home care nursing service. So we have a lot of different workers in a lot of different places, over 1,500 physicians, over 500 volunteers, and we are constantly training. We have about 400 residents that come through, all the way down to the training that we provide for our frontline workers. So it's a pretty dynamic place with a lot of different locations and a lot of moving parts. In addition to what's going on internal to us, I also think relevant to this conversation is the local and regional population and background. Vermont and New Hampshire, the star in the middle there in the background is where our academic medical center is located. And on the border between those two states are the first and the fourth oldest populations in the country. In addition to kind of being a relatively gray workforce, we have a slow population growth here, about 1% compared to about 4% nationally. In addition to that, and this is probably my favorite scary statistic that I use all the time, back in 1990, New Hampshire had 5.4 working age people for every person over the age of 65. And as our population has gotten older, and New Hampshire is actually a very attractive place for people to retire to because of our tax and some of the other services that we offer, the combination by 2030, that figure of 5.4 working people for every person over the age of 65 is going to shrink to 1.8 working age people for every person over the age of 65. And this is particularly poignant in the healthcare industry because as people live longer, they require more and more care. So just at the time that our demand is increasing, our supply is shrinking. And so both of those pressures are affecting us and making it very difficult to find the workers that we need. The next slide is just a quick snapshot that shows in a comparison to other sectors like advanced manufacturing or hospitality. Healthcare is the only sector where the thick black line in New Hampshire that's seen consistent growth in employment. So that kind of speaks to the demand that I was talking about. Next slide. This is just another way of looking at this, and one of the things the team talks about all the time is that healthcare job growth far outpaces all of the other New Hampshire industries. In addition to the one, being the only one that's growing over time, as a large academic medical center, we see the same pain points that other industries do, in that we're not just staffing for nurses and physicians and allied health roles. We're also looking for food and nutrition, environmental services, administrative support, construction services. So you can see here that our projected annual growth between now and the second quarter of 2019, so from history up to today, was almost a 12,000 person increase, which is an annual growth rate of almost 1%, which is a lot for us in a state that's seeing a shrinking workforce. Next slide. So this is a busy slide, but it sort of captures the portfolio of what we've been trying to do at Dartmouth-Hitchcock to address that growing gap between the available workforce and our growing workforce needs. So over the last 5 years, since we've opened the Workforce Readiness Institute, which is a place where people can come and build skills to step into frontline jobs, we've trained more than 450 people, many of them coming from either unemployed or underemployed positions. 6 of our programs, medical assistant, pharmacy tech, surgical tech, and a couple of others, actually lead to nationally recognized credentials or college credit. Our medical assistant and pharmacy tech programs are actually set up to get people who go through them 45 credits on the way to a 60 credit associate's degree. We have a tendency to attract people in much more diverse backgrounds into these programs. We see 8% of our apprentices are veterans. The vast majority are single moms. We also see a higher than average level of diversity in the other areas that we track. We're really proud of the fact that 100% of the people who go through the training programs have been hired into the system, so all of our workforce programs directly affect our frontline workers. And if you're going through the training, it means there's a job waiting for you on the other side. In addition to the training programs, we also have been working to round out the portfolio of what we offer to include opportunities for current college and high school students. We want to be able to spark an interest and try and build a pipeline just by attracting people to consider careers in healthcare. We've done that by introducing a number of different experiential learning opportunities, working with some of the local charter schools in the area to make sure that our internships and experiential days are linked to high school credit. And we are trying to work with colleges and graduate schools to catch people to provide postgraduate opportunities that expand careers as well. One of those areas includes our postgraduate residency for physician assistants in cardiothoracic surgery, where individuals who are just 1 year out of school are given the opportunity to deeply investigate what it's like to be in a surgical practice. And so far, everyone who's gone through the program has successfully done an endoscopic vein harvest before the end of the program. So it's been pretty exciting watching that grow and develop and pick up momentum. Next slide. So this is just a quick snapshot. Our MA program is one of our longest and most robust. It consists of 11 weeks of training followed by 2,000-hour registered apprenticeship. The students at the end of class sit for the Certified Clinical Medical Assistant exam, and then as a part of the program, they accumulate hours and ultimately sit for their RMA before they finish their apprenticeship. Next slide. This is just a quick snapshot. I wanted you to understand that all of these programs come with a significant amount of rigor. We track behavioral competencies, individual technical competencies in each of the roles, and in addition to that, our clinical departments have what they call a heat map that shows all of the individual apprentices and whether or not they've been signed off on a specific competency, which makes it really easy for our physicians to know who they can work with on a busy day, and on a day when things are a little bit more relaxed, who they can work with to do some on-the-job training and help expand skills. And it really helps us to keep track of where everyone is in their apprenticeship and to make sure that everyone's competencies are building over time and that nobody is left behind. I've got a couple of quick facts here that I just wanted to put out. We have worked very hard to track the return on investment that we've put into our programs. We were fortunate enough to start our programs using an apprenticeship grant and have had about $1.8 million in grant funding that we've used thus far to upskill our New Hampshire and Vermont residents. But this in no way, shape, or form covers all of the investment that we've put in. We worked with the Department of Commerce to do a deep dive study into the return on investment, and even without the grant funding, these are programs that pay for themselves in just about a year and have shed so much light on our processes and our management styles and our engagement and the way we develop employees that were, even if there were no grant funding, this is something that we intend to continue with because it's made such a difference in the way we work. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, kind of our quick journey, Melissa. I didn't want to take too long with the background, but I think that that really helps to sort of ground us in where we were, what we do, and where we are today.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that overview. I think it provided really good context for the next portion where we're going to do a little bit of an interview. And so I'll start with my first question being that leadership buy-in is critical to starting new programs. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your process to engage leaders throughout the organization. So C-suite is important, but at every level, how were you able to engage buy-in for these types of programs?
I think the initial conversation for us was easy because we had such a poignant pain point that we were having a hard time filling roles, and we absolutely needed the workers. But we are also a really rigorous clinical organization. So some of this was couching our journey in terms that our clinical leaders would understand. So talking about apprenticeship and being the opportunity to learn on the job is very similar to a medical residency. So that allowed our physicians to wrap their minds around, the fact that this is a very valid and effective way of learning. In addition to that, we have been side by side with our clinical partners through every step of the journey. They work with us to identify the competencies. They work with us to review the curriculum. We partner around the training that takes place in the clinics. So the training that is being delivered really teaches the Dartmouth-Hitchcock way. After every program, we go back to our stakeholders and have another conversation about what worked and what didn't. So we really wrapped this in continuous process improvement and continuous learning, which has been really helpful to keep leaders invested and involved in what we're doing.
Great, thank you. So then developing strong talent pipelines can be challenging, particularly in rural areas. How have apprenticeships expanded your talent pipeline?
I think before apprenticeship, we were only looking for people who already had acquired the credentials. So you had to find somebody who, particularly in a frontline job, already lived here, already had acquired the credential, and didn't already work for us. And as the largest employer in the area, that became a smaller and smaller subset of our population. And by adding apprenticeship, it allowed us to take a look at who has the right attitude and the aptitudes to learn, but not necessarily either a pathway that already got them to this credential or a background that even made them self-identify for being in healthcare. So people who are looking to change careers, single moms who are looking for a way to go back to work, high school students, college students who are graduating with a desire to do something, but not necessarily a sense of direction about what that would do. All of those are talent pipelines that opened us up to us as a result of apprenticeship.
Great. So that sounds like we have a question from the chat around the participants of the program, such as the MA apprenticeship, if they are already Dartmouth employees, and if not, who and from where are you recruiting from? So I think that you covered that there, right? It is both, right? Internal incumbents and people outside.
Absolutely. We look to some of our frontline, so food and nutrition, dietary, environmental services staff, step into some of these training programs as an opportunity to grow. We also recruit from the outside. We've done everything from social media to advertising on the back of unemployment checks. We advertise in the local bus system. We've put up flyers in the local grocery stores. We do all of the traditional advertising. We do radio ads and print ads as well. The idea is, how do we get the word out to people that opportunity exists and it's there for the taking if they're interested?
Great. So equity and inclusion are very important, very hot topics in the world of workforce development. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit how the impact on Dartmouth-Hitchcock's equality and inclusion goals apprenticeship has had.
It helps us. I would be lying if I didn't say that we have an interesting environment in the state of New Hampshire, and our area in particular is not an incredibly diverse one. So we are always trying to think about how do we become more diverse. On the other hand, things like equity and inclusion extend far beyond just surface diversity. One of my favorite stories is we went to an orientation night and a woman walked up to the microphone and said, "I am 55 years old. I'm no spring chicken. There's no way you want to invest in me at this stage of my life." And she had worked for an attorney who'd passed away for her entire career. So this was a huge step for her. And, looking around the room, her thought was, there is no way an employer is going to invest in someone who's so close to retirement. And we looked at her and said, if you were to stay 10 years, you would stay 3 times longer than the average entry-level pharmacy tech, and you'll be running the place by the time you're done. We went through the program. She excelled. She's still with us. She is running the place. She's been twice. And I think that this mindset has helped to expand us beyond typical thoughts around age or education or capability. We certainly see a greater diversity of people coming into our apprenticeship program than we did just applying for positions. So I think some of it is it has made us more accessible, and it's made us think differently about what talented employees look like, which has helped us to be more diverse and more inclusive in other places as well.
That's great. So when it comes to incumbent apprentices, how did Dartmouth determine the pay rate during the apprenticeship, and did you offer release time for them?
So did we offer release time?
Yes, for the training.
It varies. It varies from place to place. So when we sat down for each of our apprenticeships, we took a look at what the prevailing wage for that role was. And then we created a ramped up set of steps as part of registered apprenticeship. You know, one of the requirements are these stepped up wages. The idea being that by the time they finish, they will have, you know, journeyman's competency within the role. So we are not ramping them up to minimum. We're actually, in many cases, ramping them up to either 25% or to the midpoint. The idea is to accelerate them to full competency. For somebody who is an internal employee who goes into one of these programs, one of two things can happen. If they're returning to their department, so we'll say this is an LNA who wants to become a medical assistant but is going to stay in the same clinic, sometimes the clinic keeps that person's wages whole. However, we also pay a training wage while people are going through. If I hire you from the outside, your very first day of class, you're considered a Dartmouth-Hitchcock employee, and you'll receive pay while you are studying and going to class, with an increase when you start work and another increase at 6 months and another increase at 12 months, you know, representing your on-the-job training and competency development over the lifetime of your apprenticeship.
Great. And you may have mentioned this, but what percentage of federal state approved apprentice programs at Dartmouth? Are your programs registered with the DOL?
Some of them are. We have 6 programs, as I'm thinking off the top of my head, that are registered with the Department of Labor. So it's medical assistant, pharmacy tech, we had a patient registration representative program, a medical coders program, a surgical tech program, and an ophthalmology tech program. We've used the same rigor to create training programs in a couple of areas that don't necessarily meet all of the Department of Labor or don't meet some of our current Board of Nursing standards. So we have a training program in partnership with the Red Cross that we run like an apprenticeship program, but because our programs are licensed nursing assistants, and once they achieve that license, they're considered fully capable of getting a job at market value. We don't pay a stepped-up apprenticeship wage, although we train them with on-the-job training very much like we use our apprenticeship programs.
Okay, great. So folks are loving your heat map and curious about how that's maintained and who assesses those competencies as they come through.
That comes in partnership with our clinics. So the heat map was actually the brainchild of the nurse manager in our largest placement area. And what she was finding is these new medical assistants would hit the floor, and the physicians were so thrilled to have them that on their very first day, they grab them and say, great, you can come with me. We're going to do this dermatology procedure. And the medical assistants would go, oh, it's all I can do to room a patient. So she said the best thing we can do for them is to create this heat map that allows them to, at a glance, our physicians can see how experienced the apprentices are and where they are in their apprenticeship journey. So that is maintained by our nurse manager or medical assistant supervisors within the clinic in partnership with our project leaders who are checking in on a regular basis with the apprentices to make sure that they're meeting their behavioral competency development and they're getting the support that they need and tracking the on-the-job training that their kind of point of work managers are providing.
Great. So we do have a couple more questions, but we have limited time. So I'm going to try one. And then if we do not get to your question, I will coordinate with Sarah afterwards to get some additional information and be sure to send it out to folks. So this question is, how do you manage employee schedules with accommodating the program schedule? For example, if a full-time EVS employee is admitted into an apprenticeship program, are they expected to continue their schedule in EVS while they are training and studying?
Depends on the apprenticeship. With our medical assistant or pharmacy tech programs, we encourage them not to. Those programs meet from 8:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night, or from 7:30 in the morning to 4:30, and they typically have several hours of homework every night and homework on the weekends. It's very difficult to have another job. So individuals who are coming out of an EVS role and into that will walk away from their EVS role, which is one of the reasons why we pay for the program. For something like the nursing assistant program that only meets for a couple of hours, usually in the evenings with rotations on the weekends, they are frequently able to keep their job while they do that and then make the transition at the end.
Great. Have you reached out or advertised to public assistance recipients like those on SNAP?
We work with the New Hampshire Employment Security, and we have advertised on the back of unemployment checks. I don't believe that we have worked with SNAP per se, but we've been working with both the New Hampshire and Vermont Department of Labor and Employment Security to try and catch people in multiple different ways.
So somewhat tangential. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one program unrelated to that we have had great success with is we've got a group called Moms in Transition, where there are mothers who are in recovery, have been incredibly successful working in an administrative training program that we have, and it helps get them back to work. But they've been an excellent partner. So that's something else to think about as you think about community partners. Anybody who is doing a work transition makes for a phenomenal apprenticeship partner.
Okay, so I think that's all that we have time for questions today. So thank you so much to the audience for being so engaged, and thank you so much to Sarah for participating and spending your time with us to share a little bit about your experience. Before we jump off the call, I do have a few quick announcements. I just want to give a shout out to a couple of upcoming events. So first, our next webinar in the series is in April, on April 23rd, where the Southeast Louisiana Veterans Healthcare System will share how its investments in frontline workers who are also veterans helps improve their health outcomes. A registration link is in the chat for that one in April if you would like to register now. And then the ones in May and June, you can mark your calendar now, and more information about those will be coming out shortly. In addition, there are a few spots remaining for the CareerSTAT site visit to Louisville on April 16th and 17th to learn from our frontline healthcare worker champion, Norton Healthcare, and Kentuckiana Works, and their partners about their really innovative pipeline development programs. Space is limited, but again, more information and a registration link is in the chat. And then the National Fund's leadership convening is taking place June 25th through the 27th in Dallas, Texas. While this meeting convenes business leaders, philanthropy, employers across sectors, there will be several healthcare specific workshops and networking opportunities. In addition, the awards ceremony for the most recent recipients of the recognition awards will happen at that convening as well. And again, more information is in the chat as well. And I also wanted to point out that Sarah referenced an ROI study around apprenticeship, and we did include a link in that. So if you missed that in the chat and you would like to find out more information around the very extensive research done by economists, you can read more on that case study. Did you have anything to add to that, Sarah?
Yes, if anybody is interested in more on the heat map or our competency things, they should feel free to reach out. We are happy to share our templates. You would want to tailor them to your own location because everyone's work is just a little bit different, but I think if it would be helpful to see them, we're more than happy to share.
Great, thank you. It's always nice to have folks who are willing and able to share. I think that we are right on time, so thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. Again, I see some additional questions in the chat, and I will follow up with Sarah to get some answers and share those with the folks who are registered today. In addition, this has been recorded, and we will share that link with you as well. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to seeing you next April. Bye.
Bye.